Child, imagine for a moment a holy city, protected by massive walls, guarded by prayers, filled with divine promises. A place believed to be where God himself dwelled among men. That city was Jerusalem, and even with all its glory, splendor, and faith, it was completely reduced to ashes. But why? Have you ever wondered how something so protected, so sacred could be destroyed? How is it possible that a city with 12-meter-high walls, food reserves for years, and a trained army could be defeated? And more than that, defeated by one man, one name, Nebuchadnezzar. This is not just the story of a powerful king, it's the faithful portrait of what happens when pride, rebellion, and distance from God become greater than obedience and humility. Jerusalem fell, not because of military weakness, but because of spiritual failure. The year was 588 BC. Within the walls, 75,000 people were living their lives, confident that nothing could happen to them. After all, Solomon's temple was still standing, the priests were still offering sacrifices, and the city seemed secure. But the safety of the city no longer rested on God's favor. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, was not like other conquerors. He didn't invade with brute force alone. He used strategy, precision, and calculation. And his reputation for being unbeatable had already spread across the nations. His army, 180,000 soldiers. But they didn't come only with spears. They brought 30-meter-tall siege towers, catapults that launched 90-kilogram stones, battering rams that broke through gates like dry twigs. The prophet Jeremiah described, "Behold, he comes up like clouds, his chariots like a whirlwind, his horses swifter than eagles." Jeremiah 4:13. They didn't come to fight. They came to erase cities from the map. But what provoked so much wrath in Nebuchadnezzar toward Jerusalem? The answer lies in geography and in the heart of man. Jerusalem was located exactly between Babylon and Egypt. To control it meant dominating trade between continents. But there was more. Jerusalem was allied with Egypt, Babylon's greatest enemy. And beyond that, the people of Judah refused to bow. They said, "Our God is greater than your army." And that wounded the Babylonian king's pride deeply. For him, destroying Jerusalem wasn't just strategy. It was a statement to the world that not even the God of Israel could stand against Babylon's might. But contrary to what many expected, Nebuchadnezzar didn't start with fury. He began with a smile. In 605 BC, he surrounded Jerusalem, but made an offer that seemed peaceful. He asked only for a few noble youths to be educated in Babylon. King Jehoiakim agreed. He handed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Upright, wise, pure young men, the next generation of leaders. That was the first strike. Silent, subtle, psychological. Nebuchadnezzar didn't want just hostages. He wanted to mold Judah's future far from God. And it worked, without realizing it. Jerusalem lost its independence. The first step toward its fall had been taken, but 3 years later, Jehoiakim dared to rebel, and Nebuchadnezzar did not forgive betrayal. In 597 BC, he returned personally to the city. The young king Jehoiakim, who had barely taken the throne, didn't resist. He opened the gates and surrendered. Nebuchadnezzar looted the temple, took 10,000 captives, among them the prophet Ezekiel, and left only the poor in the city, those who didn't know how to build, govern, or lead. In place of the king, he installed Zedekiah, an obedient puppet ruled from afar, and for 11 years Jerusalem lived in silence. No strength, no freedom, no glory. Just ruins disguised as civilization. But then, Zedekiah made the mistake that would change everything. Pressured by the people and enticed by promises from Egypt, he rebelled. He betrayed Babylon. And that was the last thread holding Jerusalem together. Nebuchadnezzar would not tolerate a third offense. Now he would return, not to conquer, but to utterly destroy. and the plan he devised was the darkest Jerusalem had ever faced. Child, when the heart drifts away from God, even walls of stone turn to dust. Jerusalem trusted more in its structures than in the Lord, and Nebuchadnezzar knew it. He wasn't in a hurry. He understood that the strength of men crumbles with time, and that's exactly what he used against the holy city. In January of 588 BC, the Babylonian army surrounded Jerusalem for the third and final time. But now, there would be no more offers, no more negotiations, no more chances. Nebuchadnezzar didn't want tribute. He wanted Jerusalem erased from the map, with blood, fire, and shame. The siege wasn't an impulsive attack. It was a masterpiece of military engineering. The Babylonian king ordered a wall to be built around the wall, a city surrounded by another city. No animal, no child, no grain of wheat could enter or leave. And so, time began working in Babylon's favor. Jeremiah 52:4-5 says, "In the 9th year of his reign, the king of Babylon came with all his army against Jerusalem and besieged it. And the city remained under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah." 2 whole years. No relief, no mercy, no pause. Hunger became the most powerful weapon of the siege. At first, Jerusalem tried to resist, but the months passed and the food ran out. First, they rationed grain. Then they boiled sandal leather. Then they ate tree bark. Finally, the horror, desperate mothers cooking their own children. Lamentations 4:10 records that unthinkable moment. The hands of compassionate women have boiled their own children. They became their food during the destruction of the daughter of my people. And God's silence echoed louder than any scream, not because he abandoned them, but because the people had rejected him first. Inside the city, Zedekiah tried to maintain order, but his soldiers were too weak to even hold a sword. The gates were locked, but fear was stronger than iron. Nebuchadnezzar, from his command tower, watched everything. He knew what was happening inside the city. His spies reported every detail, even acts of desperation, the corpses rotting. In the streets, the empty eyes of starving children. The Babylonian king wasn't moved. To him, it was just another step in the plan. Every day that Jerusalem endured was one less day of resistance in the future. And then, finally, after 18 months of pain, in the early morning of July 18th, 586 BC, it happened. A crack, a breach in the wall. It wasn't an explosion, it wasn't a roar. It was the quiet sound of stones giving way to time, to weight, to the mathematics of war. A 3-meter gap in the northern wall, enough for 10 soldiers to march side by side, enough to open the gates of hell. The guards shouted, "The wall has fallen! The wall has fallen!" Panic took over. Many threw their weapons to the ground and ran. Zedekiah, without strength, without faith, without strategy, fled in the shadows, not as a king, but as a coward. Kings 25:4 describes it. The city was broken into, and all the men of war fled by night. But the enemy was ready. The first soldiers to invade Jerusalem were the archers. They climbed the towers and began shooting at those trying to escape. In just a few hours, Jerusalem's resistance was erased, not by weapons, but by hunger, fear, and the total loss of hope. And what happened next was even more cruel. Nebuchadnezzar made sure to capture Zedekiah. He wanted the king to see, with his own eyes, the destruction of what he should have protected. They brought Zedekiah's sons before him, young princes, royal heirs. The father cried, begged. He offered gold, eternal submission. But Nebuchadnezzar remained silent, and he ordered their execution, one by one, before their father's eyes. Then Zedekiah's eyes were burned with hot iron. The last thing he ever saw in his life was the blood of his own children at his feet. The Bible records this clearly in 2 Kings 25:7. They slaughtered the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, put out his eyes, bound him with bronze chains, and took him to Babylon. The justice of men may be cruel, but God's justice is holy. And he had warned his people for years, through prophets, through signs, but no one wanted to listen, no one wanted to obey. And now they were paying the price. But Nebuchadnezzar still wasn't finished. Nebuchadnezzar wanted more than just to win a war. He wanted to crush the soul of an entire people. Seeing Zedekiah blind and humiliated was not enough. Destroying families, capturing leaders, and tearing down walls weren't enough either. The final blow was still to come, the one that would strike at the spiritual heart of Israel, the temple of the Lord. That sacred place built with tears and glory by Solomon, the very place where the glory of God once dwelled, was now in the hands of pagan men. And Nebuchadnezzar knew it. That's why he left the temple for last. He wanted its destruction to be a spectacle, a symbol that not even God would protect those who had betrayed him. On August 5th, 586 BC, his general, Nebuzaradan, entered the temple with torches and axes. 2 Kings 25:9 describes it. He burned the house of the Lord, the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Everything turned to ashes. The fire consumed everything for 3 days. The smoke was visible from 50 kilometers away. Bronze pillars, the sea of bronze, the lampstands, the cups, all were either destroyed or carried off to Babylon. That same gold which the Jews had once joyfully donated to glorify God would now finance temples of idols in foreign lands. The pain was unbearable. Lamentations 2:7 echoes, "The Lord has rejected his altar. He has disowned his sanctuary. He has delivered into the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces." But it did not end there. Nebuchadnezzar gave his soldiers 3 days of free plunder. And what happened during those days is unspeakable. Women were mercilessly violated. Daughters of priests were abused in the burning courtyards of the temple. Children were ripped from their mothers' arms. Young women were branded with hot irons as spoils of war. Mothers wept for their dead sons. Daughters mourned their lost mothers. Lamentations 5:11 says, "They ravished the women in Zion, the virgins in the cities of Judah." Everything that was holy was profaned. Everything that was pure was corrupted. Everything that was sacred was trampled. And no one, absolutely no one, came to help. Nebuchadnezzar stole not only the faith of the people, but their dignity as well. He took 650 tons of gold, 2,300 tons of silver, and thousands of precious stones. It was the greatest looting in the history of Jerusalem. The city built with the gold of Ophir now lay in ashes, with the treasures of David and Solomon decorating idolatrous palaces. And the most tragic part is that God had warned them. He had spoken. He had sent prophets. He had given visions. He had offered words, but the people covered their ears. And when the voice of heaven was ignored, the sound of catapults took its place. Child, this story is not just about the past. It's about you too, about me, about all of us. Because every time we drift away from God, we risk watching our own Jerusalem be destroyed. Maybe your walls are still standing today. Maybe you feel protected by your achievements, your home, your plans. But if God is not at the center, all of it is just sand. Pride always comes before the fall. Rebellion always attracts judgment, and the hardened heart always pays the price. But listen closely. Even among the ashes, there is still hope, because God doesn't destroy for pleasure. He corrects to restore. He disciplines to save. He allows the temple to be burned so that the heart can be rebuilt. He allowed the destruction of Jerusalem, yes, but he also promised that one day she would shine again, and she did. Because God does not lie. In the midst of pain, he is still just. In the midst of tragedy, he is still God. In the midst of darkness, he still holds the light. And if today you feel like everything is in ruins, do not be afraid. I am with you. I am the one who rebuilds destroyed cities, who restores broken lives, who gives sight to the blind, faith to the desperate, and hope to those who mourn. Jerusalem fell, but the love of God remained, and it remains to this day. Now I invite you, if this story touched your heart, leave in the comments, "I don't want to lose my Jerusalem." Show that you understand, that you desire to remain firm in the center of the Father's will. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, this is the moment. Click the button, activate the bell, leave your like, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. May the peace that surpasses all understanding reach you. May you become like a new Jerusalem, strong, full of God's glory, unshakable in the face of the storm.